Chapter 8, Kingship of Heaven. Studies of the, quote, Epic of Creation, end quote, and parallel texts, for example, S. Langdon's The Babylonian Epic of Creation, show that sometime after 2000 BC, Marduk, son of Enki, was a successful winner of a contest with Ninurta, son of Enlil, for supremacy among the gods. The Babylonians then revised the original Sumerian, quote, Epic of Creation, end quote, expunged from it all references to Ninurta and most references to Enlil, and renamed the invading planet Marduk. The actual elevation of Marduk to the status of, quote, king of the gods, end quote, upon earth was thus accompanied by assigning to him, as his celestial counterpart, the planet of the Nephilim, the 12th planet. As, quote, lord of the celestial gods, the planets, end quote, Marduk was thus also, quote, king of the heavens, end quote. Some scholars at first believed that, quote, Marduk, end quote, was either the North Star or some other bright star seen in the Mesopotamian skies at the time of the spring equinox, because the celestial Marduk was described as a, quote, bright heavenly body, end quote. But Albert Chpt of Marduk Unseen Stern and others have shown conclusively that all the ancient astronomical texts spoke of Marduk as a member of the solar system. Since other epithets describe Marduk as the, quote, great heavenly body, end quote, and the, quote, one who illumines, end quote, the theory was advanced that Marduk was a Babylonian sun god, parallel to the Egyptian god Ra, whom the scholars also considered a sun god. Texts describing Marduk as he, quote, who scans the heights of the distant heavens, wearing a halo whose brilliance is awe-inspiring, end quote, appeared to support this theory. But the same text continued to say that, quote, he surveys the land like Shamash, the sun, end quote. If Marduk was in some respect akin to the sun, he could not, of course, be the sun. If Marduk was not the sun, which one of the planets was he? The ancient astronomical texts fail to fit any one planet. Basing their theories on certain epithets, such as son of the sun, some scholars pointed at Saturn. The description of Marduk as a reddish planet made Mars, too, a candidate. But the text placed Marduk in Marcus Shame, quote, in the center of heaven, end quote. And this convinced most scholars that the proper identification should be Jupiter, which is located in the center of the line of planets. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. This theory suffers from a contradiction. The same scholars who put it forward were the ones who held the view that the Chaldeans were unaware of the planets beyond Saturn. These scholars list Earth as a planet, while contending that the Chaldeans thought of Earth as a flat center of the planetary system. And they omit the moon, which the Mesopotamians most definitely counted among the, quote, celestial gods, end quote. The equating of the 12th planet with Jupiter simply does not work out. The, quote, Epic of Creation, end quote, clearly states that Marduk was an invader from outside the solar system, passing by the outer planets, including Saturn and Jupiter, before colliding with Tiamat. The Sumerians called the planet Nibiru, the, quote, planet of crossing, end quote, and the Babylonian version of the epic retained the following astronomical information. Planet Nibiru, the crossroads of heaven and earth he shall occupy. Above and below, they shall not go across. They must await him. Planet Nibiru, planet which is brilliant in the heavens, he holds the central position. To him they shall pay homage. Planet Nibiru, it is he who, without tiring, the midst of Tiamat keeps crossing. Let, quote, crossing, end quote, be his name, the one who occupies the midst. These lines provide the additional and conclusive information that in dividing the other planets into two equal groups, the 12th planet in, quote, the midst of Tiamat keeps crossing, end quote, its orbit takes it again and again to the site of the celestial battle where Tiamat used to be. We find that astronomical texts that deal in a highly sophisticated manner with the planetary periods, as well as lists of planets in their celestial order, also suggest that Marduk appeared somewhere between Jupiter and Mars. Since the Sumerians did know of all the planets, The appearance of the 12th planet in, quote, the central position, end quote, confirms our conclusions. Mercury, Venus, Moon, Earth, Mars, Marduk, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. If Marduk's orbit takes it to where Tiamat once was, relatively near us, between Mars and Jupiter, why have we not seen this planet, which is supposedly large and bright? The Mesopotamian text spoke of Marduk as reaching unknown regions of the skies and the far reaches of the universe. Quote, he scans the hidden knowledge, he sees all the quarters of the universe, end quote. He was described as the, quote, monitor, end quote, of all the planets, one whose orbit enables him to encircle all the others. Quote, he keeps hold on their bands, orbits, end quote, makes a, quote, hoop, end quote, around them. His orbit was, quote, loftier, end quote, and, quote, grander, end quote, than that of any other planet. It thus occurred to Franz Kugler of Sturkund und Sternens in Babylon that Marduk was a fast-moving celestial body orbiting in a great elliptical path just like a comet. Such an elliptical path, focused on the sun as a center of gravity, has an apogee, the point farthest from the sun where the return flight begins, and a perigee, the point nearest the sun where the return to outer space begins. We find that two such, quote, bases, end quote, are indeed associated with Marduk in the Mesopotamian text. The Sumerian text described the planet as going from Anur, quote, heaven's base, end quote, to Annun, quote, lordly abode, end quote. The creation epic said of Marduk, he crossed the heaven and surveyed the regions. The structure of the deep the Lord then measured. Yeshara he established as his outstanding abode. Yeshara as a great abode in the heaven he established. One, quote, abode, end quote, was thus, quote, outstanding, end quote, far in the deep regions of space. The other was established in the, quote, heaven, end quote, within the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Following the teachings of their Sumerian forefather, Abraham of Ur, the ancient Hebrews also associated their supreme deity with the supreme planet. Like the Mesopotamian text, many books of the Old Testament describe the, quote, Lord, end quote, as having his abode in the, quote, heights of heaven, end quote, where he, quote, beheld the foremost planets as they were arisen, end quote. A celestial Lord who, unseen, quote, in the heavens moves about in a circle, end quote. The book of Job, having described the celestial collision, contains these significant verses telling us where the lordly planet had gone. Upon the deep he marked out an orbit, where light and darkness merge, is his farthest limit. No less explicitly, the Psalms outline the planet's majestic course. The heavens bespeak the glory of the Lord. The hammered bracelet proclaims his handiwork. He comes forth as a groom from the canopy. Like an athlete, he rejoices to run the course. From the end of heavens he emanates, and his circuit is to their end. Recognized as a great traveler in the heavens, soaring to immense heights at its apogee and then, quote, coming down, bowing unto the heaven, end quote, at its perigee, the planet was depicted as a winged globe. Wherever archaeologists uncovered the remains of Near Eastern peoples, the symbol of the winged globe was conspicuous, dominating temples and palaces, carved on rocks, etched on cylinder seals, painted on walls. It accompanied kings and priests, stood above their thrones, quote, hovered, end quote, above them in battle scenes, was etched into their chariots. Clay, metal, stone, and wood objects were adorned with the symbol. The rulers of Sumer and Akkad, Babylon and Assyria, Elam and Urartu, Mari and Nuzi, Mitanni and Canaan, all revered the symbol. Hittite kings, Egyptian pharaohs, Persian shahs, all proclaimed the symbol and what it stood for, supreme. It remained so for millennia. Central to the religious beliefs and astronomy of the ancient world was the conviction that the 12th planet, the, quote, planet of the gods, end quote, remained within the solar system, and that its grand orbit returned it periodically to Earth's vicinity. The pictographic sign for the 12th planet, the, quote, planet of crossing, end quote, was a cross. This cuneiform sign, which also meant, quote, Anu, end quote, and, quote, divine, end quote, evolved in the Semitic languages to the letter Tav, which meant, quote, the sign, end quote. Indeed, all the peoples of the ancient world considered the periodic nearing of the 12th planet as a sign of upheavals, great changes, and new eras. The Mesopotamian text spoke of the planet's periodic appearance as an anticipated, predictable, and observable event. The great planet had his appearance dark red. The heaven he divides in half and stands as Nibiru. Many of the texts dealing with the planet's arrival were omen texts prophesizing the effect the event would have upon Earth and mankind. R. Campbell Thompson, of Reports of the Magicians and Astronomers of Nineveh and Babylon, reproduced several such texts, which trace the progress of the planet as it, quote, rang the station of Jupiter, end quote, and arrived at the point of crossing, Nibiru. When from the station of Jupiter the planet passes towards the west, there will be a time of dwelling in security. Kindly peace will descend on the land. When from the station of Jupiter the planet increases in brilliance, and in the zodiac of Cancer will become Nibiru. Akkad will overflow with plenty. The king of Akkad will grow powerful. When Nibiru culminates, the lands will dwell securely. Hostile kings will be at peace. The gods will receive prayers and hear supplications. The nearing planet, however, was expected to cause rains and flooding, as its strong gravitational effects have been known to do. When the planet of the throne of heaven will grow brighter, there will be floods and rains. When Nibiru attains its perigee, the gods will give peace. Troubles will be cleared up. Complications will be unraveled. Rains and floods will come. Like the Mesopotamian savants, the Hebrew prophets considered the time of the planet's approaching Earth and becoming visible to mankind as ushering in a new era. The similarities between the Mesopotamian omens of peace and prosperity that would accompany the planet of the throne of heaven and the biblical prophecies of the peace and justice that would settle upon Earth after the day of the Lord can be expressed in the words of Isaiah. And it shall come to pass at the end of days, the Lord shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. In contrast with the blessings of the new era following the day of the Lord, the day itself was described by the Old Testament as a time of rains, inundations, and earthquakes. If we think of the biblical passages as referring, like the Mesopotamian counterparts, to the passage in Earth's vicinity of a large planet with a strong gravitational pull, the words of Isaiah can be plainly understood. Like the noise of a multitude in the mountains, a tumultuous noise like of a great many people, of kingdoms of nations gathered together, it is the Lord of hosts, commanding a host to battle. From a faraway land they come. From the end point of the heaven do the Lord and his weapons of wrath come to destroy the whole earth. Therefore will I agitate the heaven, and earth shall be shaken out of its place, when the Lord of hosts shall be crossing, the day of his burning wrath. While on earth, quote, mountains shall melt, valleys shall be cleft, end quote, Earth's axial spin would also be affected. The prophet Amos explicitly predicted, it shall come to pass on that day, saith the Lord, that I will cause the sun to go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in the midst of daytime. Announcing, quote, behold, the day of the Lord is come, end quote, the prophet Zechariah informed the people that this phenomenon of an arrest in Earth's spin around its own axis would last only one day. And it shall come to pass on that day, there shall be no light, uncommonly shall it freeze. And there shall be one day known to the Lord, which shall be neither day nor night, when at eve time there shall be light. On the day of the Lord, the prophet Joel said, quote, the sun and moon shall be darkened, the stars shall withdraw their radiance, end quote. Quote, the sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon shall be as red blood, end quote. Mesopotamian texts exalted the planet's radiance and suggested that it could be seen even at daytime. Quote, visible at sunrise, disappearing from view at sunset, end quote. A cylinder seal, found at Nibiru, depicts a group of plowmen looking up with awe at the 12th planet, depicted with its cross symbol, is visible in the skies. The ancient peoples not only expected the periodic arrival of the 12th planet, but also charted its advancing course. Various biblical passages, especially in Isaiah, Amos, and Job, relate the movement of the celestial Lord to various constellations. Quote, alone he stretches out the heavens and treads upon the highest deep. He arrives at the Great Bear, Orion and Sirius, and the constellations of the south, end quote. Or, quote, he smiles his face upon Taurus and Aries. From Taurus to Sagittarius he shall go, end quote. These verses describe a planet that not only spans the highest heavens, but also comes in from the south and moves in a clockwise direction, just as we have deduced from the Mesopotamian data. Quite explicitly, the prophet Habakkuk stated, quote, the Lord from the south shall come, his glory shall fill the earth, and Venus shall be as light, its rays of the Lord given, end quote. Among the many Mesopotamian texts that dealt with the subject, one is quite clear. Planet of the god Marduk, upon its appearance, Mercury, rising 30 degrees of the celestial arc, Jupiter, when standing in the place of the celestial battle, Nibiru. As the accompanying schematic chart illustrates, the above texts do not simply call the 12th planet by different names, as scholars have assumed. They deal rather with the movements of the planet and the three crucial points at which its appearance can be observed and charted from Earth. The first opportunity to observe the 12th planet as its orbit brings it back to Earth's vicinity, then, was when it aligned with Mercury, point A, by our calculations, at an angle of 30 degrees to the imaginary celestial axis of Sun-Earth perigee. Coming closer to Earth, and thus appearing to, quote, rise, end quote, farther in Earth's skies, another 30 degrees to be exact, the planet crossed the orbit of Jupiter at point B. Finally, arriving at the place where the celestial battle had taken place, the perigee, or the place of the crossing, planet Nibiru, point C. Drawing an imaginary axis between Sun, Earth, and the perigee of Marduk's orbit, observers on Earth first saw Marduk align with Mercury at a 30-degree angle, point A. Progressing another 30 degrees, Marduk crossed the orbital path of Jupiter at point B. Then, at its perigee, point C, Marduk reached the crossing, back at the site of the celestial battle. It was closest to Earth and began its orbit back to distant space. The anticipation of the day of the Lord in the ancient Mesopotamian and Hebrew writings, which were echoed in the New Testament's expectations of the coming of the Kingship of Heaven, was thus based on the actual experiences of Earth's people. They're witnessing the periodic return of the planet of kingship to Earth's vicinity. The planet's periodic appearance and disappearance from Earth's view confirms the assumption of its permanence in solar orbit. In this, it acts like many comets. Some of the known comets, like Halley's Comet, which nears Earth every 75 years, disappeared from view for such long times that astronomers were hard-pressed to realize that they were seeing the same comet. Other comets have only been seen once in human memory, and are assumed to have orbital periods running into thousands of years. The comet 𝐶𝐒, for example, first discovered in March 1973, came within 75 million miles of Earth in January 1974, and disappeared behind the Sun soon thereafter. Astronomers calculate it will reappear anywhere from 7,500 to 75,000 years in the future. Human familiarity with the 12th planet's periodic appearances and disappearances from view suggests that its orbital period is shorter than that calculated for 𝐶𝐒. If so, why are our astronomers not aware of the existence of this planet? The fact is that even in orbit half as long as the lower figure of 𝐶oehtech would take the 12th planet about 6 times farther away from us than Pluto, the distance at which such a planet would not be visible from Earth, since it would barely, if at all, reflect the sun's light towards Earth. In fact, the known planets beyond Saturn were first discovered not visually but mathematically. The orbits of known planets, astronomers found, were apparently being affected by other celestial bodies. This may also be the way in which astronomers will, quote, discover, end quote, the 12th planet. There has already been speculation that a, quote, planet X, end quote, exists, which, though unseen, may be, quote, sensed, end quote, through its effects on the orbits of certain comets. In 1972, Joseph L. Brady of the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory of the University of California discovered that discrepancies in the orbit of Halley's Comet could be caused by a planet the size of Jupiter orbiting the Sun every 1,800 years. At its estimated distance of 6 billion miles, its presence could be detected only mathematically. While such an orbital period cannot be ruled out, the Mesopotamian and biblical sources present strong evidence that the orbital period of the 12th planet is 3,600 years. The number 3,600 was written in Sumerian as a large circle. The epithet for the planet, Shtar, quote, supreme ruler, also meant, quote, a perfect circle, end quote, a, quote, completed cycle, end quote. It also meant the number 3,600. And the identity of the three terms, planet, orbit, 3,600, could not be a mere coincidence. Berossus, the Babylonian priest astronomer scholar, spoke of 10 rulers who reigned upon earth before the deluge. Summarizing the writings of Berossus, Alexander Polyhistor wrote, quote, and the second book was a history of the 10 kings of the Chaldeans, and the periods of each reign, which consisted collectively of 120 shars, or 432,000 years, reaching to the time of the deluge, end quote. Avicennius, a disciple of Aristotle, also quoted Berossus in terms of 10 pre-Diluvian rulers whose total reign numbered 120 shars. He made clear that these rulers and their cities were located in ancient Mesopotamia. It is said that the first king of the land was Aloris. He reigned 10 shars. Now, a shar is esteemed to be 3,600 years. After him, Alapris reigned 3 shars. To him succeeded Amillarus from the city of Panti-Biblon, who reigned 13 shars. After him, Ammonon reigned 12 shars. He was of the city of Panti-Biblon. Then Megalarus of the same place, 18 shars. Then Deos, the shepherd, governed for the space of 10 shars. There were afterwards other rulers, and the last of all, Sisyphus, so that in the whole, the number amounted to 10 kings, and the term of their reigns to 120 shars. Apollodorus of Athens also reported on the prehistorical disclosures of Berossus in similar terms. 10 rulers reigned a total of 120 shars, or 432,000 years, and the reign of each one of them was also measured in the 3,600-year shar units. With the advent of sumeriology, the, quote, olden text, end quote, to which Berossus referred were found and deciphered. These were Sumerian king lists, which apparently laid down the tradition of 10 pre-diluvial rulers who ruled earth from the time when, quote, kingship was lowered from heaven, end quote, until the, quote, deluge swept over the earth, end quote. One Sumerian king list, known as text WB 144, records the divine reigns in 5 settled places or, quote, cities, end quote. In the first city, Eridu, there were 2 rulers. The text prefixes both names with the title syllable, quote, a, end quote, meaning, quote, progenitor, end quote. When kingship was lowered from heaven, kingship was first in Eridu. In Eridu, Alulim became king. He ruled 28,800 years. Alulgar ruled 36,000 years. 2 kings ruled it 64,800 years. Kingship then transferred to other seats of government, where the rulers were called En, or, quote, Lord, end quote, and in one instance by the divine title Dingir. I drop Eridu. its kingship was carried to Bad Tabira. In Bad Tabira, Enmenluana ruled 43,200 years. Enmengalana ruled 28,800 years. Divine Dumuzi, shepherd, ruled 36,000 years. 3 kings ruled it for 108,000 years. The list then names the cities that followed: Larak and Sippar, and their divine rulers, and last, the city of Shuruppak, where a human of divine parentage was king. The striking fact about these fantastic lengths of these rules is that, without exception, they are multiples of 3,600. Alalam, 8 times 3,600 equals 28,000. Alalgar, 10 times 3,600, 36,000. And Menluana, 12 times 3,600, 43,200. And Mengalana, 8 times 3,600, 28,800. Dumuzi, 10 times 3,600, 36,000. And Sipaziana, 8 times 3,600, 28,800. And Mendarana, 6 times 3,600, 21,600. Ubartutu, 5 times 3,600, 18,000. Another Sumerian text, WB62, added Larsa as its 2 divine rulers to the king list, and the reign periods it gives are also perfect multiples of the 3,600-year Shar. With the aid of other texts, the conclusion is that there were indeed 10 rulers in Sumer before the deluge. Each rule lasted so many Shars, and altogether their reign lasted 120 Shars, as reported by Berossus. The conclusion that suggests itself is that these Shars of rulership were related to the orbital period Shar, 3,600 years, of the planet, quote, Shar, end quote, the, quote, planet of kingship, end quote, that Alulim reigned for 8 orbits of the 12th planet, Alalgar during 10 orbits, and so on. If these pre-diluvial rulers were, as we suggest, Nephilim who came to Earth from the 12th planet, then it should not be surprising that their periods of, quote, reign, end quote, on Earth should be related to the orbital period of the 12th planet. The periods of such tenure or kingship would last from the time of a landing to the time of a takeoff. As one commander arrived from the 12th planet, the other's time came up. Since the landings and takeoffs must have been related to the 12th planet's approach to Earth, the command tenures could only have been measured in these orbital periods of Shars. One may ask, of course, whether any of the Nephilim, having landed on Earth, could remain in command here for that purported 28,800 or 36,000 years. No wonder scholars speak of the length of these reigns as, quote, legendary, end quote. But what is a year? Our, quote, year, end quote, is simply the time it takes Earth to complete one orbit around the sun. Because life developed on Earth when it was already orbiting the sun, life on Earth is patterned by the length of orbit. Even a more minor orbit time, like that of the moon, where the day-night cycle is powerful enough to affect almost all life on Earth. We live so many years because our biological clocks are geared to so many Earth orbits around the sun. There can be little doubt that life on another planet would be, quote, timed, end quote, to the cycles of that planet. If the trajectory of the 12th planet around the sun were so extended that one orbit was completed in the same time it takes Earth to complete 100 orbits, then 1 year of the Nephilim would equal 100 of our years. If their orbit took 1,000 times longer than ours, then 1,000 Earth years would be equal to 1 Nephilim year. And what if, as we believe, their orbit around the sun lasted 3,600 Earth years? Then 3,600 of our years would amount to only 1 year in their calendar, and also only 1 year in their lifetime. The tenures of kingship reported by the Sumerians and Berossus would thus be neither, quote, legendary, end quote, nor fantastic. They would have lasted 5 or 8 or 10 Nephilim years. We have noted in earlier chapters that mankind's march to civilization, through the intervention of the Nephilim, passed through 3 stages, which were separated by periods of 3,600 years. The Mesolithic period, circa 11,000 BC, the Pottery phase, circa 7,400 BC, and the sudden Sumerian civilization circa 3800 BC. It is not unlikely, then, that the Nephilim periodically reviewed and resolved to continue mankind's progress, since they could meet in assembly each time the 12th planet neared Earth. Many scholars, for example Heinrich Zimmern and the Babylonian and Hebrew Genesis, have pointed out that the Old Testament also carried traditions of pre-diluvial chieftains or forefathers, and that the line from Adam to Noah, the hero of the deluge, lists 10 such rulers. Putting the situation prior to the deluge in perspective, the book of Genesis, chapter 6, described a divine disenchantment with mankind. Quote, "And it repented the Lord that he had made man on earth. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I had created." End quote. And the Lord said, "My spirit shall not shield man forever. Having erred, he is but flesh, and his days were 120 years. Generations of scholars have read the verse, quote, "And his days shall be 120 years, end quote, as God's granting a lifespan of 120 years to man. But this just does not make sense. If the text dealt with God's intent to destroy mankind, why would he in the same breath offer man long life? And we find that no sooner had the deluge subsided than Noah lived far longer than the supposed limit of 120 years, as did his descendants Shem, 600, Arpachshad, 438, Shelah, 433, and so on. In seeking to apply the span of 120 years to man, the scholars ignore the fact that the biblical language employs not the future tense, quote, "his days shall be," end quote, but the past tense, quote, "and his days were 120 years," end quote. The obvious question then is, whose time span is referred to here? Our conclusion is that the count of 120 years meant to apply to the deity. Setting a momentous event in its proper time perspective is a common feature of the Sumerian and Babylonian epic text. The, quote, "epic of creation," end quote, opens with the words, "Enuma Elish," quote, "when on high," end quote. The story of the encounter of the god Enlil and the goddess Enlil is placed at the time, quote, "when man had not yet been created," end quote, and so on. The language and purpose of chapter 6 of Genesis were geared to the same purpose, to put the momentous events of the Great Flood in their proper time perspective. The very first word of the very first verse of chapter 6 is when. When the earthlings began to increase in number upon the face of earth, and daughters were born unto them. This, the narrative continues, was the time when the sons of the gods saw the daughters of the earthling, that they were compatible, and they took unto themselves wives of whichever they chose. It was the time when the Nephilim were upon the land, in those days and thereafter too, when the sons of the gods cohabited with the earthlings' daughters, and they conceived. They were the mighty ones who are of Olam, the people of the Shem. It was then, in those days, at that time, that man was about to be wiped off the face of the earth by the flood. When exactly was that? Verse 3 tells us unequivocally when the deity's count was 120 years. 120, quote, years, end quote. Not of man and not of earth, but as counted by the mighty ones. The, quote, people of the rockets, end quote, the Nephilim. And their year was the Shar, 3,600 Earth years. This interpretation not only clarifies the perplexing verses of Genesis 6, it also shows us how the verses match the Sumerian information. 120 Shars, 432,000 Earth years, had passed between the Nephilim's first landing on Earth and a deluge. Based on our estimates, when the deluge occurred, we place the first landing of the Nephilim on Earth circa 450,000 years ago. Before we turn to the ancient records regarding the voyages of the Nephilim to Earth and their settlement on Earth, two basic questions need to be answered. Could beings obviously not much different from us evolve on another planet? Could such beings have had the capability 500,000 years ago for interplanetary travel? The first question touches upon a more fundamental question. Is there life as we know it anywhere besides the planet Earth? Scientists now know that there are innumerable galaxies like ours, containing countless stars like our Sun, with astronomical numbers of planets providing every imaginable combination of temperature and atmosphere and chemicals, offering billions of chances for life. They have also found that our own interplanetary space is not void. For example, there are water molecules in space, the remnants of what are believed to have been clouds of ice crystals that apparently enveloped stars in their early stages of development. This discovery lends support to persistent Mesopotamian references to the waters of the sun, which mingled with the waters of Tiamat. The basic molecules of living matter have also been found, quote, floating, end quote, in interplanetary space, and the belief that life can exist only within certain atmospheres or temperature ranges has also been shattered. Furthermore, the notion that the only source of energy and heat available to living organisms is the sun's emissions has been discarded. Thus, the spacecraft Pioneer 10 discovered that Jupiter, though much farther away from the sun than Earth, was so hot that it must have its own source of heat and energy. A planet with an abundance of radioactive elements in its depths would not only generate its own heat, it would also experience substantial volcanic activity. Such volcanic activity produces an atmosphere. If the planet is large enough to exert a strong gravitational pull, it will keep its atmosphere almost indefinitely. Such an atmosphere, in turn, creates a hothouse effect. It shields the planet from the cold of outer space and keeps the planet's own heat from dissipating into space, much as clothing keeps us warm by not letting the body's heat dissipate. With this in mind, the ancient text descriptions of the 12th planet as, quote, close with the halo, end quote, assume more than poetic significance. It was always referred to as a radiant planet, quote, most radiant of the gods he is, end quote, and depictions of it showed it as a ray-emitting body. The 12th planet could generate its own heat and retain the heat because of its atmospheric mantle. Scientists have also come to the unexpected conclusion that not only could life have evolved upon the outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, but it probably did evolve there. These planets are made up of the lighter elements of the solar system, have a composition more akin to that of the universe in general, and offer a profusion of hydrogen, helium, methane, ammonia, and probably neon and water vapor in their atmospheres, all the elements required for the production of organic molecules. For life as we know it to develop, water is essential. The Mesopotamian text left no doubt that the 12th planet was a watery planet. In the, quote, epic of creation, end quote, the planet's list of 50 names included a group exalting its watery aspects. Based on the epithet Asar, quote, watery king, end quote, who established water levels, end quote, the names described the planet as Asaru, quote, lofty, bright watery king, end quote, Asar Uludu, quote, lofty, bright watery king whose deep is plentiful, end quote, and so on. The Sumerians had no doubt that the 12th planet was a verdant planet of life. Indeed, they called it Nam-Talaku, quote, the God who maintains life, end quote. He was also, quote, bestower of cultivation, end quote, creator of grain and herbs who causes vegetation to sprout, who opened the wells, apportioning waters of abundance, end quote, the, quote, irrigator of heaven and earth, end quote. Life, scientists have concluded, evolved not upon the terrestrial planets with their heavy chemical compounds, but in the outer fringes of the solar system. From these fringes of the solar system, the 12th planet came into our midst, a reddish, glowing planet, generating and radiating its own heat, providing from its own atmosphere the ingredients needed for the chemistry of life. If a puzzle exists, it is the appearance of life on Earth. Earth was formed some 4,500,000,000 years ago, and scientists believe that the simpler forms of life were already present on Earth within a few 100,000,000 years thereafter. This is simply much too soon for comfort. There are also several indications that the oldest and simplest forms of life, more than 3 billion years old, had molecules of biological, not a non-biological origin. Stated differently, This means that the life that was on Earth so soon after Earth was born was itself a descendant of some previous life form, and not the result of the combination of lifeless chemicals and gases. What all this suggests to the baffled scientists is that life which could not easily evolve on Earth did not, in fact, evolve on Earth. Writing in the scientific magazine Icarus, September 1973, Nobel Prize winner Francis Crick and Dr. Leslie Orgel advanced the theory that, quote, life on Earth may have sprung from tiny organisms from a distant planet, end quote. They launched their studies out of the known uneasiness among scientists over current theories of the origins of life on Earth. Why is there only one genetic code for all terrestrial life? If life started in a primeval, quote, soup, end quote, as most biologists believe, organisms with a variety of genetic codes should have developed. Also, why does the element molybdenum play a key role in enzymatic reactions that are essential to life when molybdenum is a very rare element? Why are elements that are more abundant on Earth, such as chromium or nickel, so unimportant in biochemical reactions? The bizarre theory offered by Crick and Orgel was not only that all life on Earth may have sprung from an organism from another planet, but that such, quote, seeding, end quote, was deliberate. That intelligent beings from another planet launched the, quote, seed of life, end quote, from their planet to Earth in a spaceship for the express purpose of starting a life chain on Earth.
Without benefit of the data provided by this book, these two eminent scientists came close to the real fact. There was no premeditated, quote, seeding, end quote. Instead, there was a celestial collision. A life-bearing planet, the 12th planet and its satellites, collided with Tiamat and split it in two, quote, creating, end quote, Earth of its half. During that collision, the life-bearing soil and air of the 12th planet, quote, seeded, end quote, Earth, giving it the biological and complex early forms of life for whose early appearance there is no other explanation. If life on the 12th planet started even 1% sooner than on Earth, then it began there some 45 million years earlier. Even by this minute margin, beings as developed as man would have already been living upon the 12th planet when the first small mammals had just begun to appear on Earth. Given this earlier start for life on the 12th planet, it was possible for its people to be capable of space travel a mere 500,000 years ago.
End of Chapter 8. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe for more. Also, please comment sequel below if you want to hear Book 2 of the Earth Chronicles series, The Stairway to Heaven.